Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Modern Musician Podcast. I'm delighted to have the supremely talented
Dan
Jack
Davies here.
Hey! Along with the supremely talented Dan Davies, we have the even more supremely talented Mr. Jack Gardiner.
Too kind, guys. Too kind.
Welcome to Musicisum.
Welcome to another office that we've shot a podcast in.
Yeah.
The background changes with every episode.
I know.
It's quite funny.
We're experimenting. We're trying out different stuff and seeing what works. But look, we've just wrapped up the best part of a week of filming with Jack. He's been doing a deep dive into neo-soul guitar and all of the harmonic and theoretical understanding of being able to really open up the fretboard. So it's been a savagely beastie few days of filming, has it not?
Do you know, it's been really smooth though, I will say.
Cool.
I thought it was going to be, it's stressful.
A bit stressful.
Everything's gone to plan, I think, so far. You guys are all monsters at what you're doing, so that's half the battle.
Thank you,
as long
man.
as I can
That's why
notes.
that's why we like to accompany ourselves with other monsters.
Yes.
So that the whole driving force can be driven by monsters.
At this point, I'd like to mention our show sponsor, Monster. It's been amazing to see you do your thing. It's been really, really cool.
Thank you very much.
So you and Phil are obviously good mates. Phil Dyer.
Yeah, he's
who we had in October doing a course on kind of modal theory, and I think there's a bit of competition here on whose course might be longer. I think you might be winning.
Oh, really? I mean, Phil is one of them. I mean, if I drank that much coffee, I'm sure it would affect me.
So that would be a very interesting thing to correct for Phil's caffeine consumption.
Yeah.
Therefore, the increased pace of teaching. If you slowed him down by 0.1, 0.2, maybe there'd be an even situation, because that guy drank a lot of coffee.
What I found really funny is I was showing you some of the videos from his course, and you said that he looked angry.
Yeah, he just looks really, really peed off, shall I say. And he got way more scouse as well than he would in a conversation with me, which I found interesting.
That's hilarious.
Usually you tame the accent.
I think he was trying to tame it back, but fortunately we're going to be subtitling his entire workshop.
Yeah.
I'm sure it sounds like Norwegian or something.
We seem to be building a reputation for ourselves of bringing in these incredible Liverpudlian guitarists to just come and deliver the knowledge. So,
Hook us up with some of your mates.
It's all that polluted Mersey water, I think.
We're becoming the regionally focused guitar tuition.
Yeah, I was saying we should rename the company to Musicisum.
Musicisum. Oh man.
So, I guess take us back. Where how did all this guitar stuff get started for you?
So I think really, if I go right the way back to the beginning, my parents have tons of old VHS tapes of me watching the likes of Jimi Hendrix, the Grateful Dead. They were all the kind of artists that my dad loved, with broomsticks and with Mickey Mouse guitars and stuff like that. My dad's a musician, he's a bass player.
So you want to do a course?
Yeah, get him in. But,
Senior Gardiner.
Gardiner Senior. But yeah, he's he's played in bands for years when he was younger. Actually ended up becoming a pro racing cyclist though. That was a bit of a mad career change. But anyway, back to the point, I remember he had a Frank Zappa, I think it was a video. I don't think DVDs were about just yet, but I saw Steve Vai, and I'll never forget this moment. I remember stopping what I was doing and being like, I want to play guitar like that. But still, my dad refused to buy me an instrument. He'd seen that, or in his experience, music wasn't a full-time job kind of thing. And it was my auntie who actually bought me this battered old acoustic guitar.
They're actually battered.
Yeah, well, yeah, that could have been quite tasty actually, especially up north. But so I remember having classical guitar lessons there, and I think there was a moment where the teacher had said to my dad, at they have the parents' evening and things, and he went, "You do realise he's playing way more advanced than what he should be." He was like, "Are you teaching him at home?" And my dad was just like, "No, I've not really even I don't even think he was paying attention to the fact that I was practicing. But then when I was 11, I picked up electric and I played in like a local band of kids. Essentially, my little brother was in it as well. He played drums. We did quite a few gigs playing like Pantera tunes, Metallica tunes and stuff like that. It was weird seeing these little goth kids playing metal music. But then, yeah, I mean, my first teacher was when I was 11, John Wheatcroft. He was a monster, another Scouser. He's insane. He used to be the head of Guitar X, which I don't think that's around anymore, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, he was ridiculous, but he was always off on tour, or, he was teaching down in London, so the lessons were kind of spread out. But then it wasn't really until YouTube came about. I think I discovered that when I was about 11 or 12. I think I put the first videos up when I was like 14, playing like Racer X stuff and Paul Gilbert. I got way into him, Yngwie, all those guys, the G3 stuff. And then Guthrie came onto the scene. I'll never forget that. That was back in, it must have been 2008, 7, maybe earlier than that.
Well, all those videos, the Blues Jam Tracks videos where he was playing, and he looked like he had grayer hair than he does now. It was really odd.
Yeah, I thought he was like in his 50s.
Yeah.
Well, there's that video of him playing fives, which is like legendary. Yeah.
Maybe he's like a Benjamin. Is it Button or whatever?
Benjamin Button.
Yeah.
Guthrie Button.
We'll see it. Like little Phil, we'll see a little Guthrie.
The better he gets, the younger he becomes.
Yeah.
He's in a quest for immortality through shred.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it was, in fact, that video, the Larry Carlton jam. I remember watching that and think there was one lick in there that I still play now. And we have a bit of a joke in China Crisis. Whenever I get like an improvised solo, I'll throw that in to try and sound a bit more sophisticated than I am. But it comes up everywhere. If you go back through my videos, you'll see it. I might not give that away, but just watch the Larry Carlton jam and you'll see that's where most of my language comes from. But yeah, I think I met Tom Quayle around when I was like 16, and he basically like took me under his wing. I remember going to watch him play with Adam Nitti. Do you know him, the bass player? Ridiculous player. They played at like the Manchester Bass Show, and he was with Rick Graham at the time. And yeah, it was one of them instantly kind of, we got on, and he said, I was asking him for lessons, and he was like, "Oh, come up to Leeds." And so I think for about a year and a half, every week I'd go up. We never necessarily have a lesson every week. I think we only had 4 or 5, but I'd get to jam with him and Rick and George Marios, the other guy, the Greek guy, who were all just freaks. And I think being in that environment was when I just became obsessed with guitar. I'd come home after school and I'd sit there for like 8 hours, not necessarily like practicing, but just playing all the time. That was when the real kind of inspiration came about, I think. And the way that Tom taught me, I mean, we've had conversations about this, and I think a lot of the content in the course, we brought it back to this point, like the whole intervals thing just blew my mind. Like he made me realise in that first lesson how little I knew as a guitar player.
Yeah, so I was about to ask, what was your first guitar lesson with Tom Quayle like?
Yeah, I mean, I was terrified because he was like a hero almost, and then I'd only met him once at the bass show, so I was a little bit nervous, but my dad took me up. My dad went cycling actually all around Leeds for a few hours. I remember that. Came back covered in mud. I was like, "Dad, what are you doing?" But yeah, I remember he sat down. We had the guitars, and he was like, "Play me." I think it was like, "Play me an A-7," and I was like, "Okay, one shape, I know that." He was like, "Play me another one." I was like, "All right, okay." There's the other one which I know. He was like, "Play me another one," and I was thinking, "Oh, do I know one more?" Kind of maybe got that one, and then he was like, "Now another one," and I was just stuck. I just didn't know what to do. I froze, and he was like, "We need to go over the groundworks," kind of thing. He was like, obviously I think he saw that I could play a bit and I could improvise, but I didn't really know what I was doing. Back then, I guess it was just like play by numbers. He showed me the intervals thing, and that was like mind blowing. He made me feel like I knew nothing, but at the same time, it felt like he gave me all the information in the world in just that one lesson, and that was the foundation really for everything now. I mean, still, I go back to this whole intervals method. I think that is the way forward. If you really want to improvise, and have a fundamental understanding, that's the way to go, in my eyes anyway.
Yeah.
I think what's been fascinating for me as a non-guitarist watching you teach this stuff over this week is how much focus you've put on trying to give that fundamental knowledge, by not just say, even in the neo soul genre, not just saying, here are some licks, or here's how to sound like you can play neo soul, but really what you're about, at least in the context of this material, is about having an understanding of those rules and those harmonic relationships and how it works across the whole fretboard. It's been really fascinating to see how that applies, and how much I could totally understand as a guitarist unlocking that information. You'd be like, whoa, there's just, you can, so much freedom.
Oh man, cheers, dude. Yeah, I mean, I think it is one of them. like a lot of people like to think of it as like the jazz school of thought, don't they? And the second they hear like theory and harmony, it's like an instant turn off for some people. But I remember for me, it was the total opposite. Yeah, in school, like, I mean, I failed my grade 5 theory. I remember that story behind that, but I won't go into it. Maybe not on this podcast. But yeah, I think having access to information, but in a really simple way, that was the big key. I mean, breaking it down the way that like Tom did, and now the way that I understand it and teach it. I think a lot of it can be a little bit like, how do we say this? Like, they're trying to give you a little bit of information, but there's still a mysticism around it. I think you can view music in a really simple way if you do it the way which we're doing. Like, it is really simple. Think about it. There are like 7 notes, isn't there, in a scale or whatever, 7 intervals. And then if you count the extensions, you've got the 9th, 11th and 13th, but they're all already in the scale. Maybe 8 if you've got like a diminished scale or something like that. But that is the building blocks. And if you understand how each one of them functions, I mean, obviously the relationships can become crazy when we start adding all sorts of notes. Look at like Jacob Collier. I mean, he's going even further with the microtonal stuff and whatnot. But I think it really does boil down to just these little building blocks. And I think as guitarists, maybe we don't learn in that way, do we? When we first pick up the instrument, it's like you learn a pentatonic scale, you learn a few shapes, but a lot of it relies on muscle memory. And not, for me anyway, I don't think enough emphasis is put on like understanding how you build these shapes or why we tune, for example, like, you know, not in fourths like Tom does, which makes way more sense if you think about it. But like, you know, to be able to accommodate open chords, really, that's an interesting thing that, you know, I think maybe not a lot of guitarists understand that. They always just assume, oh yeah, the B string's just a bit different, whatnot. They're not actually thinking, oh,
no one ever asks. They just all follow along. Yeah,
because it doesn't make sense if you think about it logically. Like, no other instrument does that, does it? But yeah, I guess it's one of those. I mean, for me anyway, I love to understand what I'm doing at all times. I think I'm a bit of a control freak in that sense, you know. But also to have the freedom, like, to explore other sounds. Like, you know, if you're viewing scales in terms of like intervals or formulas. I mean, I was terrible at maths, but it's simple formulas if you think about it. It's just understanding that, okay, you know, major scale is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then the Lydian, all you need to do is like sharpen that fourth. I think a lot of people teach it in the way that, you know, they do this whole like, oh, D Dorian is D to D, all the white notes and all that. And that is really overcomplicating it, I think, at least, you know, and it's not really translatable. If we go back to the point, like, I always like to think of like music as like kind of like a language. You learn these little rules and whatnot, but I think it's important that, you know, you can understand the function of every single like letter, shall we say, in a word, or, you know, like, let's go more towards like the punctuation and stuff, like commas, you know, like formulas or structures of sentences. I think that's way more important than just learning a load of licks and stuff, you know?
Yeah. I think there's a broader point there as well for people listening, you know, musicians of all disciplines, is that there's a tendency, I think, to shy away from really understanding the deep theory of what you're doing, because I think for 2 reasons. A, it's intimidating, and B, there's a fear that by becoming overly theoretical, you'll lose that kind of intuitive, creative feel thing. Isn't it? But I think it's the more I dive into drums, and the more we bring in people who have you know really dived deep into their instruments, the more it's apparent to me that, you know, it's the opposite, that actually having the deepest understanding theoretically of what you're doing gives you more freedom, because you're having to work stuff out less as you go.
That's it, yeah. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because it can go 2 ways, can't it? Like, I know a few players that know way more harmony than I'd ever, you know, be able to comprehend, kind of thing. But then the playing is not necessarily there. Whereas there are players, like, I mean, we've talked about them that, you know, are ridiculous, like freaks, but you could ask them, can you break that down? And there's no kind of knowledge. I guess it's having the balance, isn't it? You know, like between musicality and the knowledge and whatnot. I think it still goes back to that point of it being like a language. Like, you know, a lot of players might know technically, like, you know, we play this scale over this chord, or, you know, like you can have, say in the Dorian mode, it's the 6 or whatever. But then they might not necessarily be listening to the music that, you know, contains that, or musical examples. And you hear that in the playing, it sounds like a scale kind of thing. I think like one thing which was really important for me, at least, was transcribing as many different players as I could. Not necessarily like sitting there on a computer and being like, right, okay, let's get each individual note. It was like hearing things and going, how did he phrase that? Like, you know, like, there's listening to the bends, listening to like the little subtleties and stuff like that. That's one thing I think that gets looked over as well. And if you deep dive into theory, maybe you can forget about all of that, the fun part and the creative part. You know, you think you're locked into these rules of a scale, or, you know, I think it's good to have a bit of a balance again, like, you know, experiment and see what works. Like there's certain things which I think I've done in this course where, you know, I'm playing over a -7 chord, but I'm putting in a major 7 interval, which technically shouldn't be there. But if you phrase it well enough, it can make it sound like a minor major 7 chord, or it tricks the listener, you know. I think it's interesting. Theory can be really important, but again, it's like the whole breaking the rules can actually give you something creative in the end, you know.
Yeah.
So when you kind of turned, I think it was around 16, 17, you started doing a lot of the function kind of gigs. I don't know if that was kind of session based or if it was just you joined a function band, but from what I know about kind of your career, that sort of took over and you were doing a whole load of that. So looking back on that now, is that something you'd recommend somebody going into?
I wouldn't say do it as hardcore as I did it, because I felt really burnt out. That was the thing. I was coming home after gigs and I wouldn't even want to look at the guitar. But I think that's the nature of the function gig, really, isn't it? You know, I think it was the biggest jump in terms of my playing, and I think Tom Quayle would agree with this. Like, playing live every night is very different from sitting in your bedroom and
Is that what you were doing every night?
It was pretty much like 6 nights a week sometimes. Yeah, we play. There's a street in Liverpool called Matthew Street, which has like the Cavern and, you know, all the iconic venues and whatnot. And basically, when I think it was 18, was when that just took over. We were doing that. There was a few other bars around Liverpool, and then weddings and corporate stuff. It just became a bit relentless, you know. Like, it was great at the time, because at 18 you start thinking to yourself, I can make a living just off gigging and whatnot. But I think it kind of trapped me for a bit longer than it should have, really, because then I put all of the kind of online stuff to one side. I was thinking, I'm earning my living doing this, and I was neglecting what I really wanted to play, you know. And I think as well, like, in that world, other musicians, like great musicians and stuff, like keyboard players, drummers and whatnot, but they don't kind of get the whole instrumental guitar thing, or, you know, like, maybe they don't listen to, I'd say, like jazz stuff, like even modern kind of jazz, neo-soul stuff, Snarky Puppy and stuff like that. They're not necessarily listening to that, so you can feel quite isolated. You're more thinking, I've got to just serve the function tune or the cover tune, you know. I think there was a few times where you run the risk, especially in like the shred kind of guitar stuff, of people labeling you as that. And I definitely did struggle. There was certain gigs that I wouldn't get the call for, because people would see the YouTube videos and they'll be like, he's just a shredder. Like, you know, he can't play funk and soul and stuff like that. Whereas that was actually what my bread and butter was. I was playing the funk and soul gigs, all the kind of Stevie Wonder, you know, Luther Vandross, all this kind of stuff. So I had that language there. But they'd see a YouTube video, they'd see the hair. No, we don't want this dude, you know? Like, he's just going to turn up with a Gibson Les Paul, like, you know. But,
so was it with those function gigs, was it kind of with the same crew each time? Or did you have like your group of players that you all went out and did stuff, or was it with lots of different people?
Yet, so there was, the first band was actually, Phil was a part of that for quite a while, Phil Dyer. That was me, a guy called Carl on bass, singer Rob Mather, who looks like Russell Brand, and then a drummer, Ollie Graham, who was in Carter City. I don't know, you know, that metal band. But yeah, that was when it was absolutely relentless, and I kind of learned the ropes then. It was weird, because the first few function gigs, I didn't really have that much repertoire. Like, I didn't know too many of the classic funk and soul tunes. And even still now, I find that the classic rock stuff, there's a big gap in my knowledge there, which is weird. As a guitar player, usually that's the first thing you go for. But no, I did the opposite. It was like funk and soul and R&B and pop. And now it's like more back in Switzerland. Some of the function gigs are rock-based stuff, you know. But
did you recently have to learn Back in Black? Is that what you're saying?
I still don't know it. Like, no, that's terrible.
Can we bring you back for another workshop just to teach Back in Black?
Yeah.
Imagine that. Jack Gardiner teaches Back in Black.
Can you imagine? Can you teach me, actually?
Yeah, sure.
Do a musicism course and I'll get that. But no, I think the massive turning point with the function stuff was when I was playing with, there were guys that were all kind of based from a gospel background. So a guy called Elijah John Jack's bass player, he's from the Caribbean. Ended up in Liverpool somehow, I don't know. He is a freak. I mean, you think of like guys like Andrew Goucher or, you know, people like that. That's who he sounds like. And then keyboard player James Ritchie, who, I mean, he's worked with the likes of like 50 Cent and stuff like that as a producer. Wow. He was actually, you know, Rio Ferdinand, the football player. Mm-hmm. He had like a record label in, I think it was the maybe early mid 2000s. Yeah, it was all R&B stuff, you know, like from around the north, like Manchester. I think some down in London as well. But James was the producer. He said it was the most bizarre thing. He said he gets this phone call one day off Rio Ferdinand saying, "I've heard you're like, you know, good keys player, good producer." He was like, "I want to hear some of your stuff." He was like, "Oh yeah, cool," you know. He said he turned up and it was like mum's council house in Manchester in his big, you know, 4x4. Rio Ferdinand comes upstairs, listens to a few beats that he's made and was like, yeah, you're in. You're my main producer now, kind of thing.
That's amazing. What an incredible story.
Absolutely bizarre, yeah. But I mean, he grew up, his whole family, I think, like played in the church, so they can all... The thing is with the gospel guys, it's like they can play like every instrument so well. I think I told you guys about when like Corey Henry came to one of our function gigs with this band in Liverpool after they'd finished their gig. And he comes over and he's like, "Do you mind if I get up and play?" We were like, "Oh my God, Corey Henry, like seriously." He's like, "But I want to play drums." And we were like, "What? No, like you're a keys player." He's like, no, I want to play Ain't Nobody by Shaka Khan." And I remember like he counted in and I was just like, "You git, how can you be that good?"
Wow.
You know, like he put everyone to shame in the room. Like it's one of them. But I mean, yeah, those guys, when we started playing again, it was funk and soul kind of stuff and R&B stuff. But it was in the arrangements that they'd do on the fly and the reharms and all that. I remember some of the first gigs where I'd just be laughing for most of the gig. Like I'd stop playing and I'd just be like, "What was that?" You know, kind of thing. But then that really taught me to use my ears. It taught me about the number system, which is like massively important in that. Well, you know, these are types of guys that you can ask them what have they just done, and they can't like break it down necessarily in the way which we've been trying to do this week. They'll just be like, "Oh, it's that G minus something," and you're like, "No, there's way more going on there." But for them, it's just so natural, and you know, like it's in the church all the time. I remember doing actually a couple of like church gigs with a minister and all that. They'd ask me to come in and dep, and it's fascinating. Like the keyboard player will literally comp. He'll just pick a key, and he'll like play through. And as the sermon's going on, you know, like they're bringing up the emotion, he'll be just playing through keys. He'll be, you know, mad fills and whatnot, but it's all cohesive and it's on the fly, totally improvised. Like it's mental, man. But yeah, that was the big turning point, and I think that was what got me into neo soul guitar, because they were telling me you need to check out players like Isaiah Sharkey, Spanky Alford, you know, all these kind of dudes. Yeah, it was mind blowing. This was kind of before it became massive on Instagram as well. Like that's been another turning point, I think, with this style, hasn't it? Like
definitely
past couple of years, like guys like Mateus Asato, you know, he exploded, didn't he? He's a wicked player. But Isaiah as well. You know, I don't think that many people were familiar with him until Instagram came about. And I mean, the guy's a freak. There's so much you can learn just from little snippets. But yeah, it's kind of the new style, I suppose, isn't it?
For sure, yeah. Did you so the kind of, I guess, the function thing happened quite naturally, like you probably just knew who you knew and kind of fell into it. But from doing that, do you think that led on to other opportunities? Like, do you think doing all that function stuff opened the doors for where you've gone to in your career now?
I think, yeah, I mean, the main thing is like with the function stuff, it's just great for networking. You know, you're constantly surrounded by other musicians and whatnot, and you learn, you know, who's into what style and who plays what. I mean, even now, like if I think about it, so I'm playing with the band China Crisis as a sideman, but like two of those guys that are in that band who are like mainstay members, we played together since we were like 18, you know, function band. So it was great for that, for the whole networking aspect and whatnot. But in terms of like career-wise, as a player, yeah, it definitely influenced me. But other than that, I'd say it's one of them, like, it's a bit of a trap, at least for me it was anyway. I felt like I wasn't moving where I should, you know, like it's very easy to go, I've got 5 gigs a week, or, you know, I've got a wedding and a corporate event every weekend, and you kind of forget why you wanted to play music in the first place. You know, I think I was constantly worried about how we were getting gear to the gigs, or, you know, the logistical side of things, more than actually the playing. And like I mentioned earlier, like I'd come home, there was days where, or even weeks sometimes, where I wouldn't even touch the guitar at home because I'd had enough. It was like the gig was the practice, which I suppose in some ways works. I mean, think the Beatles, that's what they did, wasn't it? They went over to Germany, I think, before they went huge. And it does really build like an internal clock. It, you know, it helps you to understand how to communicate with other musicians, and you start seeing what time feel is, and, you know, like developing your own groove and whatnot. But the other end, yeah, it's hard to stay inspired, at least for me anyway. Like, I'm playing the same tunes all the time. Yeah, you can mess with arrangements like we did with the gospel guys, which was super cool, but it can become very stale, you know.
Yeah, you can see how that happens if you've got. Yeah, it seems like it can form a really good part of that stage of your career. And obviously for some people that's just what they do, that's what they enjoy doing. But it does seem there's a lot of people that, you know, it's a great entry point for them to be able to start earning some money from playing, to just kind of often just get thrown at the deep end with people that might be more experienced than them, and the pressure of, like, you know, that number of shows is really positive. But yeah, I guess it's just remembering why you want to play, and why, you know, what you enjoy about playing guitar, and trying to keep that front and center, at least for where you're going long term. Totally.
I mean, it's sad to say, but there's like certain musicians that I played with, like when I first started these function band stuff, who were killer. And, you know, you watch now, it's like, what, 8 years later, and the playing, it's almost as if like they've regressed, like their playing's got worse. And it's because, like you were saying, you know, like there's no inspiration there to get better necessarily. Like the general public, I mean, when you play a covers gig, they don't care really what you're playing, so long as they can sing along to a tune and whatnot. Yeah. It's all about making it fun for yourself. I think that was the main thing, and like pushing you know, your arrangements and your communication. I mean, the amount of times like I'll have got to a gig and like solo section comes and I'll think, oh, that sounded actually really cool, and you get to the end of like the minute-long solo, and it's just a flat response, you know, and you're like, oh, gutted. Yeah. Like, let's just go back to playing G, strong G.
Strong G, as Phil Dyer would approve of. Yeah.
So, I mean, you've obviously played a ton of gigs in kind of a variety of settings. You've done the YouTube and Instagram thing a bit. You've taught. Is there anything you think that isn't spoken about enough in the music industry?
Mental health was one, definitely, for me. Like, I did a big YouTube video about that, because as well as doing the function gigs, I was obviously doing like YouTube quite a lot when I was younger, and Facebook was the one then, I think, before Instagram really took off. But yeah, like I kind of had a bit of a breakdown with it. I ended up having crazy panic attacks and whatnot. Like that was really difficult to deal with in terms of the gigging. I remember the first time that happened, where before it became like a daily, this was I think the first actual day. I remember walking towards a gig in the centre of town. Oh, sorry, I was being picked up in the centre of town, but I was like 5 minutes away from my house, and I remember just feeling like this whole dread come across, and I genuinely thought I was going to have like a heart attack. I had to hold on to some railings. I was like, oh my word, I'm going to have to get a taxi, even though it was like a 10-minute walk. Jumped in the taxi. Guys who were picking me up, we got to the gig, and like we sit down. It was only a trio setting, so me, cajon player, and a singer. And I remember like 2 tunes in, all of these feelings came back again, and I was like crippled. I had to say to the singer, I was like, man, we need to take a break. We need to stop. He was like, we can't. Like, you know, this is a 45-minute set. Like, you're playing for a client, essentially. Anyway, he managed to get through one tune, and he was like, okay, let's go outside, but then we need to carry on straight the way through. So it was like 2 45s. I remember for an hour and a half thinking, this is it. I'm going to go at any moment here. And then it was a daily thing for about 2 years. And in that moment, like, I started neglecting really social media, you know? So it was probably the worst time to do that, because it was just as Instagram took off. But a lot of it as well was like I was seeing all of these players, and I know loads of musicians go through this, but maybe they don't talk about it, where I was seeing them play and I was like, oh my word, I need to practice, I need to do this. But then I started getting into this like mental space where it was like, well, I'm just not good enough, I'm not going to do it, you know, like, and all of that together kind of stopped me, I think. But there was no real support at the time, you know, as a musician. Like, you say that we're all self-employed and things like this, aren't we? Like, you've still got to do the work, but there's not, I don't think people talk about it enough. Now it's starting to, I think people are opening up about their experiences, and the amount of musicians I've spoken to who've said they've been through similar things, it's quite frightening, really. I think there was a musicians union did a study in where they saying like something like 70% of musicians or people in the industry have dealt with depression or panic attacks or anxiety, which you think is a terrifying number, really, isn't it? You know, and how many of them have not got help? You know? It's crazy.
I think because social media has accelerated that, I think, for people, because I think it magnifies people's reaction to stuff, and so I think that's probably, although there's a downside to that, maybe the upside is that it's also brought that conversation to more of the mainstream quicker, because I think it's seems to be a more, you know, accepted thing for people to talk about, not even just in musician or creative circles, but just people in general, I think, have experienced the downside of that constant comparison. We talked about it. It's actually been pretty much every podcast we've done with people, hasn't it? Is that, you know, you're comparing your day-to-day life to someone's, you know, curated show reel of their life, and it's never going to be a fair comparison, because people are picking the moments that, you know, make themselves look exciting or good, or, you know, and I really like people that are willing to put out things that show them, you know, failing, because but, you know, to show their process of how they get somewhere, because I think it makes that so much more relatable. You know, there's a drum teacher online called Mike Johnston, who's just, you know, fantastic teacher, and he's what I really love about him is his whole ethos of what he's encouraged people to do is, you know, embrace, because I think it was like embrace the suck. He's kind of like, you know, like embrace the fact that you're gonna suck when you're practicing something. You should sound bad when you're practicing something that you can't play. If you sound good all the time, you're not practicing. And everyone's terrified of sounding. You know, I've even had it like practicing sometimes. You know, at the rehearsal studios, I'm playing something, and I'm like, oh, this sounds terrible, because I'm like working on like my double kick or something. It's going all out of time, and I get this thought sometimes. I'm like, you know, what if someone walks past and hears me playing this, and it's so stupid, you end up getting in your own head. Whereas if you don't actually practice and sound bad because you're playing something you can't play, how are you going to get any better?
You're never going to get there. Yeah. That's the thing. I think like Instagram kind of encourages that in a way, doesn't it? Like the whole 1 minute clip thing, and people want to cram in as much as they can. It's this whole desire to be perfect. But as you say, like, we all sound bad at some point, you know. We're trying to learn, then obviously we're going to make mistakes. Like if you were to sit me down now with like a load of changes, I'd struggle. I would sound like a beginner guitarist.
Or Back in Black.
Oh, Back in Black. yeah, true. But I think, like, as you say, that I like that the drummer embraced the suck. That's actually really cool. Yeah, because I mean, I've been there. Like, there are things which I would definitely not accept to do. I'm terrible with like alternate picking and stuff like that. And I think I've joked with you a few times, like when we've been in the room and I've been going, it just won't work for me, you know. The other thing is like with the improvisation, like that's why on Instagram I've tried to like keep like videos with like raw camera audio and stuff like that, because I think as well, like, I don't want to kind of present this image of that's how I always play. I mean, when you gig that much, there are gigs that just don't go well, and like improvisations that just don't flow, and mistakes, like mechanical mistakes that happens all the time, you know. I think like for the only thing which I'm worried about is like the younger generation are going to think that you have to be perfect all the time, you know. And I think really in some ways we should encourage them to explore and be honest. Like I saw the other day, there was a big, was it a podcast or a post or something like that, where they were talking about how toxic the guitar community is at the minute, you know. Like it was Ultimate Guitar actually, wasn't it? Yeah, they were saying like people are terrified to post videos because of like the trolls that will come on now, you know, like people who, you know, maybe beginner guitarists and things like that are terrified to post a video of themselves because they're worried that they're going to just be told you suck.
I wish there was a button that I could press that forced all of the trolls to have a video of themselves put online because, I mean, we all know how it would go.
Oh, yeah.
There's very few people out there who are fantastic players who are sitting on Instagram trolling other people.
Yeah.
Like,
That's actually a really good point.
they just, they don't, like, there's so much respect
Exactly.
among great players.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's like across styles as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, like, can you imagine Isaiah Sharkey saying, you know, like Jason Richardson, what is this?
yeah, this wouldn't happen
Like,
because they're both incredible musicians.
Exactly.
And they both, even if they don't like each other's playing, I know nothing about whether they know each other, but I can guarantee you there's a mutual respect.
Oh, 100%. Like, you can hear it.
Because it's no matter what the style, to get really good at it is really hard. And so you can't disregard the effort and patience and consistency it's taken someone to get good, even if you don't like necessarily the style they're playing. So I think that probably most people get that.
Yeah.
It's such a shame that people feel put off from sharing their progress.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that before this whole sort of this kind of social media revolution. And again, it comes with its benefits and its downsides. But we are definitely trying to encourage people in our student community to share more. It's something we want to focus on a lot coming up is you know, and we've been shooting a lot of these challenges with artists that we're bringing in. They're designed to be a kind of short, digestible thing that someone can look at and can work on. And we want to really encourage people to share those clips of them trying these out, because you know, I think if we can help people get over that, it's a really big obstacle for a lot of people with their practice.
Totally.
It's that kind of embarrassment of what's natural, which is to sound, you shouldn't, like, I got the same point, you shouldn't sound great all the time, because then you're not practicing anything.
Exactly.
I'm going into that, like, embrace the suck thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to take a long time for people to learn the stuff that you've just put across in the course that we've done. Like, there's a lot of theory there's a lot of harmony, there's a lot of chord shapes and understanding intervals that just takes a long time to get under your fingers. So people are going to sound rough as they're learning it.
Man, I'm still discovering new things like with it every day. You know, like this. How can you learn all the shapes on the fretboard? There's no such thing. Like it's all building blocks, isn't it? You know, and I think for me, I know there's definitely like deficiencies, shall we say, in my playing, and there's weaknesses there. Like even with some of these chord types things, like there's certain chord types which I don't feel mega comfortable, especially if you know, if we look at like the harmony and how it's moving through changes. Sometimes I really struggle to play. It takes so much time and so much effort to internalize this, and then it's a whole different story when you come to playing with other people as well. Like, so you'll find, like, you think I'm absolutely nailing this at home. You get in the band situation, everyone's looking at you like, dude, what is that? Like, come on. Like, stop. But it is, I guess, people need to understand that there is no shortcut, really, is there? You know, like, that's, I think, what social media presents, especially with like things like licks and whatnot. Like, you know, obviously you can learn a lot from a lick if you dissect it and, you know, you spend time with it and you look at its other applications. But if you just learn that lick as like note for note, what are you actually getting from other than being able to play that lick at that tempo over that backing track in that key? Like,
its application is very limited because if you haven't got the knowledge of how it's constructed, and that's, we had this conversation yesterday. That is what we are really trying to be all about with the educational stuff that we make. Is we want to bring people in who are also passionate about sharing actual knowledge, getting right down to the roots of what makes music work, and not just giving people 10 licks to sound like this player, for example. Because I just think the value in that and the application of that is so limited compared to understanding how that's actually constructed.
So,
and there's definitely a place for getting 20 licks.
100%.
You know, absolutely. Like, it's always good to expand your repertoire, but there should be an invigoration of people who want to learn and like want to learn deeply, like how they can put this stuff together so that they can develop themselves. Because if you just learn 20 licks to sound like someone, then all you're going to do is sound like someone. You're not going to develop your own voice.
Yeah. Brings it back to the whole language thing, doesn't it? You know, like I'm always a massive fan as well, like, of if you are trying to learn licks, I know this doesn't sound great if you're trying to sell licks, but if you are trying to learn licks, you should be using your ears to do that. You know, like it's more the concept of you want to know where the thinking comes from behind those licks. For me anyway, like if I listen to a player, like that's what I'm more interested in. Of course, like you want to get the flash and you want to get the technique and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really the deeper understanding of where that, you know.
Well, how can you tell if a guitarist doesn't listen to themselves? There's one thing that always sticks out to me is if a guitarist doesn't listen to themselves, they can't bend or play vibrato.
That's the killer. Yeah, I am so put off if a guitarist. Did you ever see the Rick Graham video on this? Bad vibrato ruins lives. Like, man, it's like public information briefing. You've got to check that. It's true. He plays this insane Rick Graham legato shred lick, whatever economy pick thing, and he gets to the last note, and his vibrato's like. And it ruins everything that's just come before. And he's made such a good point. It's true. Like, I think people focus less and less on like the manipulation of sounds, don't they? And like the voice that they can create nowadays, because they do want the flash and they do want, you know, the technique and all that, which is really cool. I love it. But yeah, vibrato, bending, time feel for me is like the big one. Like, it's all well and good people like playing over backing tracks or playing with themselves, but if I can't hear that like groove in their playing, I struggle to listen to it now. And I wonder, I mean, you're a drummer, Ben, like you must hear that sometimes with drummers as well, like who are the time machines essentially.
I mean, you know, that's referred to in drumming terms as sort of, you know, pocket. Obviously feel is a kind of unanimous word across all instruments, but yeah, it's just that it's that thing that makes you move and enjoy it.
Totally. And
you know, it's like a running theme in what we're talking about here is that there's so many facets to being a great player, and you can't. Well, you can probably get away with being weighted towards certain ones more than others. Like you could probably get away with being weighted very heavily towards feel and groove, and not much on theory, you know, or repertoire necessarily. But it does seem like, you know, to be an absolute monster, you know, you've got to pay attention to all these different facets, like theory, technique, you know, repertoire, like timekeeping, you know, feels, stylistic awareness. There's, you know, improvisation. There's all these kind of aspects that make someone able to just deliver the goods in every situation.
So true, so true. I remember watching a video. A guy had gone around NAMM show. And he was interviewing like all the guitarists, saying, "What are the three most important things?"
The music is win guy.
Ah, was it? Yeah,
and they all said practice.
Yeah. Except for Maroon 5's guitarist, who said, "Serve the," and he has like a light bulb, and he's like, "Song," and you're like, "That is it." Yeah, he's just nailed it, kind of thing. And I think that is something that people forget about as well, isn't it? Especially like in the guitar world now with the shredders and whatnot. Like, it's very easy to just go down one path. We're forgetting that like bands like, I know even in the rock world, like Zeppelin and stuff like that, they were serving the tune, weren't they? They had all their, you know, like their technique stuff for the time, I'm sure was amazing. But again, it was the music that was kind of first and foremost, you know, forget about the guitar. Like, yeah, it's important and it's cool, but I think the song and the music is the first thing. The pocket, the time feel, all those things that we've just said. Like,
I saw the other day, Vic Firth Sticks reposted a video of a drummer called Ash Sohn.
Legend.
Monster.
Okay, so we're all on the same page. Just, man, every video puts that on, like, oh, you dirty individual. There's so much groove.
I can't wait to take that little clip and set it as my text message of that sound.
I love that guy's playing.
You need a Kleenex.
You know, for the very reason we were just talking about, is he literally plays for the song. He's, you know, probably one of the most prolific session players in the UK. He's played on countless #1 records. So anyway, Vic Firth shared this clip of him playing, you know, a fairly simple but just beautifully played part. And there was this comment that was like, oh, you know, anybody could do that. You know, it was like, you know, glad to see that's all it takes to be a successful. And it was just really like venomous, typical, you know, social media nonsense kind of comment. And then it ended up in this whole debate. And anyway, Ash actually came in and made a comment, and he said, I think playing for the song, and that whole being like a song drummer, he said, I think it's one of the I'm paraphrasing, but one of the highest expressions of the art form is to be able to make a song feel great.
Yeah.
In his opinion, and I would agree, is probably the most important thing as a musician. If you want to interact with anybody else with music outside of yourself, can you make the other musicians feel great? Can you make people listen to the song feel great?
Yeah.
And I think it's a great thing for people to remember, particularly as they're working on all this other stuff around developing their playing, is that really is the highest purpose of what you're playing, is to make a song feel good.
Yeah,
You know?
totally.
Yeah, Ash Zone, the #1 multiple time session drummer, responding to the absolute nobody.
We need that troll button you were on
Yeah.
about. Yeah. Posting.
Totally.
Yeah.
It'd be fairly telling.
I'm glad to see that that's all it takes. Anyone could do that. You bloody couldn't.
Yeah. You go
Because
on
if you
tour
could,
with, you know,
if you
like,
could, you wouldn't have the time to be posting that comment.
I know.
exactly.
And it also illustrates the point that, you know, even if the technical part he was playing was, fairly simple,
Yeah.
the amount of time and attention and like recording yourself and listening back and working musician it takes to make it feel like he makes it feel it's the secret sauce, you know.
Yeah.
And it's that thing that I think you'll never be able to replicate that with all this kind of digital technology, or, you know, sampling or triggering, or, you know, like all the stuff that's coming out. You know, that innately human thing that makes you put feel into music is something that maybe one day we'll have in the AI feel bot. But
Nate
you know,
Smith.
yeah. I'd buy that just to say, I'm out. Like, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, just a final point on that. Like, I mean, some of my favourite guitar playing is on stuff like, have you heard the track Never Too Much by Luther Vandross? Mm-hmm. That guitar part is so simple when you break it down. It's just a couple of double stops and then some single line stuff. But it grooves so well. And like, you know, you don't, like I say, you're only playing, I think there's 4 notes in there, but it's the rhythmic aspect of it. It's where those notes are placed, the time feel, the swagger that it's got about that, you know, is, for me, that says a lot more than, say, someone who's playing 1,000,000 notes per second. That can sound amazing as well, and that can sound like full of feel and whatnot, but it's just little details, you know, that really do make playing sound cool, in my eyes anyway. Like, yeah.
And when someone leaves the space for those moments to pop out as well, that's, you know, I think that's a huge thing for people listening to remember, is that, you know, if you go through like an intense period of learning all this stuff, or just learning new things, you know, the temptation is to throw it all in at first, isn't it?
Totally.
But whereas, you know,
I've been guilty of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, look at this new lick I've used. It's on everything I play now for the next 6 months. But, you know, the contrast between, you know, not playing Flash and just laying it down and then having those moments that stand out, I think that's another sign of someone that's really paid attention to their musicality, is they know when not to play.
It's musical maturity, isn't it? I think, yeah. Like,
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that is a great point to wrap up the podcast on.
Yeah, I had one more question, and that is, like, what's on the horizon for you? What do you have coming up? Are you putting any music out? Are you gigging?
Yet, so, I mean, I moved over to Switzerland back in October. I've been really focusing actually on getting my own music done. Focusing more on the kind of online aspects and you know, YouTube, Instagram, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a few interesting collaborations coming up. I'm still playing with China Crisis, who, I mean, massive Liverpool 80s pop band. We've got a few festivals, fingers crossed, in the summer to play. Yeah. That could all go. I was actually supposed to go to Ireland with them today, but they didn't let me know that we had this gig until about a week ago. Yeah, I told them that's not going to happen. I wonder if they've actually got there, because did you see
Probably
today?
not. I think Ireland's closed the doors.
Down, yeah.
Crazy. For people that are watching this, maybe a significant time ahead in the future, we are in the grips of a global
pandemic,
coronavirus pandemic, which we currently don't know how it's going to pan out. There's a lot of gigs and tours being cancelled at the moment.
Scary times, especially for us musicians. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I guess I've got a load of my original stuff that I'm hoping maybe to release as singles or an EP, maybe an album.
Singles.
We
were talking about this.
Yeah.
We should do a podcast on that. Why we think releasing singles is the way to
go.
The
way forward, yeah. It's just about getting the musicians, the right ones, and the right producer. I'm working with a guy, Pierre Danel, who's in the band Kadinja, Do you know them at all?
Vaguely recognise the name, but
Yeah, they're going on tour. Or well, they're supposed
they're
to be
not.
going on tour with Periphery. next
he's
month,
producing
but-
your record for half price, mate. That's
Yeah,
what he's doing.
exactly. Yeah. And I've got 10 tracks here. Actually, yeah, you're busy.
Yeah, hey, you got some time.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, just on the train, I guess. There's long slog, which we all
Wonderful.
know.
Brilliant.
And if people want to check out more of what you do, what's your Instagram? What's your YouTube?
So Instagram's a funny one because Jack Gardiner Music and Guitar was already taken. So it's
Okay.
Jack_Gardiner_Music. That's the
Cool.
one.
Yep.
And then YouTube, it's just Jack Gardiner.
Nice.
That's the first one.
Amazing. Well, on behalf of all of us at Musicisum, Jack, you've absolutely smashed this out.
Cool.
Thank you so much for really taking the time to teach this stuff properly. Again, I think for anybody that really wants to spend the time on this material, it will be a game changer. If they haven't got a grip on this stuff already, it's going to unlock a lot of people's playing, I think. So I'm really excited to share this with everyone.
Many thanks,
And
guys.
it's been a pleasure to spend some proper time with you, man.
Oh, you too. It's been literally so easy compared to what I thought it could have been. Like you guys are freaks.
Well, we can all be freaks together
Yeah.
in the music education world. Amazing. All right. Well, that's been another episode of the Modern Musician Podcast. Thank you for watching. And we'd love it if you went and checked out Jack's Neo Soul Workshop. I've been Ben.
I've been Dan.
I've been Jack.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Cheers, guys.